Hey, everybody. We are back with the Next Level Leap podcast. And I want to introduce you to a longtime client of mine. It's become a dear friend. And this is Jena Castro-Casbon. Welcome,
Oh,
Jena.
it's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me, Laura.
Yeah. And so you are the CEO of the Independent Clinician, and you primarily help speech language pathologists and also the occasional OT get started and grow their private practice. And this has been such an incredibly informative client experience for me because I knew nothing about the industry before we started working together. But maybe share a little bit about your background and what brought you to this point.
Absolutely. So I'm a speech language pathologist by training, and I got started working in rehabilitation hospitals. So most speech pathologists work either in schools or in hospitals. And so I went the hospital route and I was working there for a while, and I started to get kind of burned out only about a year or two in the profession. And most, SLPs and OTs think of themselves as helping people, right? We have hearts of gold, just like teachers and nurses. And so we want to help all the people. But sometimes in our professional worlds, if you work in traditional settings, you're not able to help people in the way that you want to help them. And that becomes frustrating over time. So I was very lucky to have a couple colleagues who noticed that I was feeling frustrated, and they thought, Jena, why don't you start a private practice? And so I did. And that really helped me have, more control over my career, of my finances, of fulfillment, of feeling like I was able to help again. And then what happened was people started asking me, like, Jena, how did you start your private practice? Like, how did you know how to do that? Because there really wasn't any information available for speech therapists or occupational therapists to start practices. And so I started, I put together an ebook. This was in 2008. This was a long time ago. That was, how you sold information back then. But I really put together a little ebook about how I did it. And I really filled that gap in the marketplace of there just wasn't information. I had some information, people wanted it. And so I thought the best way to distribute it was on the internet, and maybe I'd charge a little bit for it. That's how my business came to be. I now don't do ebooks. I do, courses and programs. But nonetheless, I've really built this business over the last, we're coming up on 15 years, which is crazy. We've had a ton of growth. And especially in the past 3 years, Laura has been part of that. But that's really what I did, is I took something that I had done and I taught other people how to do it. And it's helped me, it's helped them, it's helped the clients that they serve. Everyone has been able to win.
It's so good. You offer such an incredible service. And as you had mentioned, it's to a completely underserved market. And the market isn't just underserved on the clinician side of things, right? It's underserved very much on the consumer side. Like there aren't enough speech language pathologists. If you have a situation that you are just dedicated to finding somebody to help with you privately, like outside of a school or hospital setting, there's not that many options. And so you've really created this incredible ripple effect with the amount of people that you help, who can then in turn help more people who are in need of services. And so what do you think are some of the biggest challenges? I know you and I have brainstormed this a lot behind the scenes of getting people who are clinicians who might have master's degrees in clinical work to think like an entrepreneur or even consider entrepreneurship.
A challenge, to be honest with you. Right? Like when people talk about different markets, right? I fully realize that I am in a market that is harder to sell in than, say, weight loss or relationships or whatever. I mean, very technically, my offer is a make money offer, right? So I'm teaching people how to make money. But the problem is that clinicians are not openly driven by money, right?
Yes.
They're driven by helping. And
Mhm.
so it has been a little bit challenging to help my market understand, the whole concept of getting a return on investment.
Yeah.
Very foreign to them, right? So they can see this as like a great opportunity, but the other problem is that there's a lot of self-doubt. There's a lot of
Mhm.
imposter syndrome. There's a lot of, well, I'm not a business person, so how could I be successful in a business, right? So I'm constantly trying to, remind people that, before you became a speech or occupational therapist, you didn't know how to do that. You learned how to do that. Like you can learn how to be a business person. And you can be a wonderful business person, right? You can be a business person with a heart of gold who's really out there in the world helping people. It doesn't mean that you're greedy or that you're, any of those, negative connotations that sometimes my audience has. And so that's been a little bit of a challenge, is to get people to think outside of the box and to consider choosing a different path. Another market that I think thinks better about this is psychologists, right? So
Right.
about 50% of psychologists are in private practice. And I know whenever I meet a psychologist, I kind of assume that they're in private
Right.
practice, right? And so the path to private practice is a lot clearer in the mental health professions, but it's not as clear in physical therapy too. There's much more physical therapists who have private practices, but speech and occupational therapy, they're not there yet. And so I'm happy to be the one that is trying to bring this opportunity to the speech and occupational therapy market.
It's so, so good. And I love that you were saying that they're not motivated by money, because I think for some people you would consider that to be like an honorable thing, right? But then to a degree, it's always about the money, right? Like as Jerry Maguire would say, it's always about the money. It's always about, how much money am I making right now? How much money could I make? Is it worth the risk of leaving the safe and secure thing? Where maybe I don't have the lifestyle that I would desire. Maybe I'm not even helping as many people as I would like. But it's giving me a sense of security that is maybe kind of deep down conflicting with my higher calling, but ultimately makes it difficult for me to think outside of this path that's been predetermined for me, right? So I'm curious, like, how do you help people be motivated by that kind of higher calling when it's so easy for them to be like, gosh, that sounds like a really good idea, but I could have a pension.
Yeah. And I hear that a lot, right? And so,
Yeah.
but what I try to remind people is it's really about control, right? So one of the things that happens with our professions is that, it's a air quotes good job. Like
Right.
we're always on, whether it's Money Magazine or Forbes or whoever, of like the top professions, right? We're always like the number 3 or 4 best healthcare professions, right? And so we have a pretty good starting salary and a lot of job security. But what you sacrifice is any kind of upward mobility,
Yeah.
right? So most people can start at, $50,000, $60,000 a year, but there's almost no way to get any more than that. So
Hmm.
you could be working for 20 years and 30 years, and the maximum salary you would ever get is like 70,000 a year. Now, we know that also my professions, or my profession and OT2, are mostly women.
Hmm.
A lot of women who have families, people who have houses, essentially people who have expenses. And so their, expenses are increasing, but their salaries aren't. And so I'm also helping them kind of understand that that's a problem, and that waiting to make more money is like not, I think, not a good solution. I one of my mantras or whatever is to create, don't wait for opportunities. And
Hmm.
so I'm constantly trying to help people understand. And the way that I teach people to do private practices is to start on the side of your job. You actually don't have to quit your job in order to start a private practice. You can start your private practice and still have your, steady pay and benefits until you're ready to leave. So I really try to make this a lot less scary for my people who can be scared of new things and of what they might perceive as risks. But, the people who have been through my programs and who I've helped report feeling overwhelmingly better, like in their life, in their career, that sense of fulfillment, the ability to earn more money, to go on vacations, take their kids to Disney World. People aren't going to Vegas and, I don't know, buying crazy things. Like they're painting their house or like enrolling their kids in ballet, right? So those are the kind of things that I attempt to talk to my people about who are worried about, starting a business when really they think of themselves as a healthcare provider.
Yeah. It's not a lot of speech language pathologists going wild after getting their first client, buying a
No,
Porsche.
no, there's no pictures of me with Lambos, right? Or traditional internet marketing people who do that. I would do better to have a picture of someone with a minivan
Yeah.
So anyway,
I think you had that in your ads for a while. I think you had your family like in a minivan getting ice cream or something like that.
yep,
I thought
the
that was
Honda Odyssey. Yep.
yeah. Oh my gosh, love it. And so I'm curious too. I mean, we've been thinking about like their journey, right? We've been thinking about, okay, so they start and then they grow. What are some of the considerations that you've had to take that you have had to think about when creating this ascension plan? Like, so they start with private practice when they're with you, and then we try to help them learn how to grow their private practice and take that next step. Like, what are some of the ways in which you think about that process for your people?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can't remember if this is before we started recording or after, but some of my people are like turtles,
Yeah.
right? Like they move fairly slowly, right? These are high fact finder type of
Yes.
people. For those of you who are familiar with the Colby, I'm a 10 quick start. So the idea of fact finding is like completely foreign to me. But nonetheless, some of my people move a bit slowly. And one of the reasons why is they've got a lot of stuff going on. Like, again, many of them have families, they've got other jobs, so they may not be able to move as quickly. But there's been an interesting shift in the last couple of years. I've always talked about this idea of starting your private practice on the side, and I still believe that that is the best way to start. And when I first started teaching people how to do this, that's what the preference was. Most people just wanted to earn like a side hustle, some side income, and keep a small private practice. Over the last 2 years, and especially with COVID, people are done in the school system.
Mhm.
They are done in hospitals. And so they're actually looking to go full time in their private practice and grow it and hire people and have, physical brick and mortar locations, maybe even more than one. And so there has definitely been a shift
Mhm.
from having just like a smaller business to growing a larger one. So my primary offer has always been our program's called the Start Your Private Practice program, and we've recently introduced the Grow Your Private Practice program, which is our Ascension product for people who are looking to grow. So it has been a little challenging thinking about when are people done starting and when are they ready to grow.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, we kind of think of that as like, when do people want to go full time in their practice? When do they want to accelerate the amount of clients that they're seeing? Because as we know, if you have more clients, at some point you're going to need to hire people, right? And so
Yes.
that's really what that program is designed to do, is to help with that next phase of private practice growth and of the private practice journey.
Yeah, so good. And that's a lot of the work that we've done together. So I'm curious, what made you decide to reach out to me the first time? So we'll start with how did we get working together, and then we'll begin to discuss some of the work that we've done together as well.
Absolutely. So you were recommended by a friend. And I remember the very first thing I did was I listened to your podcast.
Yeah.
Ironically, I got your name and was like, well, let me, check out this woman's podcast. And I started listening and I went back to the very first episodes. And what I could hear was, I know that you had positioned yourself as someone who worked with people who had businesses like at $1 million or more.
Mhm.
And at the time that I called you, I was right there, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly where I was. And so I was like, okay, check that box. Like I'm ready for Laura. But I remember that, there's so many programs, and I'm the kind of person who's bought all the programs. Like if you looked at my bookmark of courses, I've bought them all, believe me.
You
Like
have.
I've literally bought them all. But most of those programs help you get to your first six figures or your
Yeah.
first 10K months. And or they promise to get you to $1 million, but that's a lot harder. But I was able to have a mentor who helped me get to that first $1 million. And it was really important to me that she helped me make a plan, and that I couldn't see how to get there, right? Like I knew that I had a good product, but I couldn't see the path and I couldn't see the plan. And once I got to $1 million, first of all, it was awesome. It felt incredible, right? I was very excited about it.
Yes.
But then it's almost like I got halfway up the mountain, right? I thought I was going up the full mountain, but really I only got halfway or even less than halfway, if we're being honest. But I got to a landing on the mountain and she was kind of like, bye, I got you to your goal. And I looked around and I was like, oh my gosh, how do I keep going? Like, who is there to help for the next phase of business growth? And it was perfect timing, like divine intervention, that someone gave me your name. And so that's why I contacted you, honestly, was to help me get to the next level. Because as a visionary, sometimes I think I still struggle with vision, which is weird, but it's true. It's not really the vision. I have the vision, it's the plan. And so
Yeah.
that's one of the things that you are really good at is helping make the plan and then figuring out how to back into that plan. And so we're doing great things together, right? You've really helped my business grow a lot, but that is why I contacted you initially.
Yeah. Okay. That's so good. And that's so interesting. I remember you saying that you had read the book Who Not How, and you said to me recently you were my who, and I was like, really? Oh, I'm so glad. But I think that explains it a little bit more of how, like what gap you were looking to fill within your company. And for you, what are some of the highlights of us working together?
Oh my gosh, so many highlights, y'all. I could go on for a long time about this. But I think one of the highlights, I guess I can share two highlights. So one of the main highlights is really thinking about having you help me make that plan, right? And like the how to back into the plan, right? So part of it is like where are you going, but it's how you're going to get there strategically versus in some sort of chaotic way. The other thing that I think that you do really well is honestly help me focus, right? Like I'm a visionary entrepreneur. I also have ADD. Like I come up with shiny objects all the time. And Laura does such a great job of helping me focus on like what is going to actually move the needle. And I just thought of actually a really good third thing, which is this idea of just not reinventing the wheel every time, but really looking at what worked and what didn't work about, you know, a launch or a promotion or whatever, and tweaking that versus what my natural inclination is to do is just to start over. Right.
Yeah.
If I feel like a webinar didn't convert as well as it could, I'm like, okay, well, that was terrible. Like, I'm going to make a new webinar. And I can't tell you how many times I have made new webinars only to at the last minute just deliver my same old webinar that just continues to do really well, right? But you really helped me focus, and truly it's so cliche, but like really work smarter
Mhm.
versus working harder.
Oh, it's so awesome to hear. And I know we worked on your messaging a lot too. I think probably a lot of listeners could benefit from that because when you're thinking about your messaging, you're so close to it. It's so hard. And the go to for many people, I mean, I'm working right now with a client who's already grown and sold like a $50 million business. And it's still something that I think is so common, no matter what level of business you're in, is to lead with the functional benefits, right? To lead with the things, with the container, with the bullet points. Like as many times as we hear it, it's just we catch ourselves doing it because it's the more tangible way to lead with our marketing. And we've really flipped a lot. We've had to dig into your people and like their mindset, right? When it comes to their motivation.
Yeah. But one of the things I'll say, Laura, that is constantly impressive to me about you is, you know, you're not a speech pathologist, right? You maybe you know a couple, but like just being part of hearing like in our team meetings and everything else, like your voice, you can do a very authentic messaging in the voice of a speech pathologist or how I should talk to people. And it's been constantly impressive because I know that you work with a lot of different types of clients, different industries. But y'all, when all of a sudden Laura starts talking to my market, I'm just writing stuff down. I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta say that. I gotta say that, right? Because you just speak so naturally and from the heart
Mhm.
as to exactly what they need to hear to have that mindset transformation and feel comfortable moving forward with a sales decision, right? But sometimes you're absolutely right. I'm so close to it that sometimes I lose track of how to talk to my people, and like you consistently nail it. And that has been really helpful just to have an outsider opinion too about like, I don't know how to talk to people, but for you're really good at messaging, and the words that come out of her mouth sound exactly like the language that my people use, and more importantly, how they need to hear the message.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. I love hearing that. And I think what I try to encourage when people are learning consulting is to tap into your empathy, to tap into your intuition and only take clients that you believe in their product because you can't fake that. Like that will end up catching up with you. And for all of my clients, they offer such different things, but I'm so passionate about what they deliver that you can tap into that deeper place in the marketing, into that intuitive, empathetic place to make the powerful connection to help them realize what's possible. And I think for your people, while my children haven't needed speech language pathology services, they've needed other types of services like specialized OT. And I think about the parents, right? When we are doing a lot of the work together, I can, and I think anybody who's listening can do that with marketing, right? It's like, think about the person that you know, think about the neighbor, the friend, the relative. Maybe it's you or your own children, or if you're not a parent, a friend's child, and what you would want for them, right? Like what type of experience you would want for them, and how can you help the person in front of you experience a transformation that will then go on to have the ripple effect to other people in the community and the world. And I'm such a believer in women-owned business. And I think that if there's anybody who's going to be changing the world for the better, it's women and the really cool guys that get it. I have a couple of those as clients too. But I think, that person, that speech language pathologist who's maybe in a school or in a hospital and their talents are underutilized and their time is being taken up by admin work. And not that we shouldn't have speech language pathologists in schools and hospitals, but can we also make them available to the general public for people who have needs and may particularly may have experienced some backwards movement during the pandemic in terms of social emotional skills or speech skills. And there's so much need out there. And for any speech language pathologist to think that they don't have what it takes to meet that need, I just want to flip that script so badly. And I think it's like where that comes from. It comes from that deep empathy.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things that really sets Laura apart from other people is just that you have a really nice feminine touch, a really nice feminine energy, but also with that sales background and that marketing background that you can, talk to people in an empathetic way, but also in a way that helps people move forward comfortably. Right. I mean, I think that the whole, internet marketing land is like dominated by these really broy marketers. And I've bought all of their programs too. And then I try to figure out how to feminize the messaging. And, although I'm a woman and my market is women, sometimes I still kind of get stuck thinking about like, oh, but like that's how the broy marketer guys would say it. And so anyway, so Laura's just really good at, having a really feminine energy, which, my market is, 97% female. So they need to be talked to in a way that really makes sense and is empathetic and caring, but also that helps them make a decision one way or the other, right?
It's really interesting you say that, because I think we could use fear-based messaging with your market and it would work. I think that because they are rule followers, because they are protocol people, if you basically told them that the path that they were on was scary and hard, and that you had a path that was less scary and easier, they would convert. But I don't think that I don't think there would be longevity to that decision. I
Right.
think what would happen is that they would convert out of fear and then realize this path is really scary and hard too. And they wouldn't go the distance that we need them to go in order for them to have the impact in the world that we know is possible. I think by telling them what is possible, by helping them understand the positive future that they can expect by making this decision, and also being honest about the pieces that may be challenging so that they're not surprised when they get there. Yes, it benefits your business, right? Because then you have better lifetime customer value, then you have better stick rate with your programs, you have better completion rate, like all of that. But ultimately, then we're also going to have a better chance at helping them at what it is that we want them to do, which is to open a private practice, hire other speech language pathologists, fill up their calendar, open a second location, and start helping kids who aren't getting served, and adults too. I know we talk about pediatrics a lot, but you didn't come from pediatrics, you came from the hospital setting. So helping anybody, helping people who have been through a stroke or through really difficult health situations, making sure that they always have that private option, which I think is really, really important, because anybody who has gone through the system with a health issue knows that you're going to get a certain level of care when you are a volume patient, and you're going to get a specialized level of care when you find that right and perfect private practitioner. And that's what we want to help more people be able to do.
Yes. Another thing I can touch on briefly has to do with like level of market sophistication. Like I can't remember who it is who has like the 5 stages of market sophistication,
Yeah.
but my people are at the lowest.
Yes.
So the analogy that they always use is like with the diet world, like, lose weight. That's would be like level 1, right? Like level 2 is like lose weight with exercise or like whatever. Like you have to make it more and more specific. And then the highest level is like insane, right? Lose weight with exercise in 2 weeks, only eating pizza, blah, 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 right? But my people really can just be like literally the name of my program is Start Your Private Practice. That's what, or webinars. When I do webinars, and sometimes I do automated webinars, like people, I don't pretend that they're live, right? But people sometimes think they're live and they'll message me like, oh my goodness, Jen, I have to go to the bathroom, right? So it's like, you can leave.
Yeah.
It's not real, but you know what I mean? Like it's kind of interesting about this whole level of market sophistication in terms of communicating to my audience. And I think that's something else that Laura has really helped me do.
Yeah, I would say that's a pro and a con, right? Because I think from a pro perspective, they're not tired of challenges. They're not tired of webinars. They're not fatigued by them. They don't necessarily know what they are, or they haven't signed up for them before, right? So that is one side of it. And then the con, as you had said, is that you've got to meet them where they are and take them along the path. And I think that's also something that you do really well. And we came into working together of you doing that really well. And then we've honed that in even more. But I think a lot of times people might try to offer something at like $6,000 or $10,000 when there's very low market sophistication and they struggle with their conversion rates, because it's like you're trying to take them from 0 to 60 with either your free content or right away within the program. And it's a lot to ask of a person to get caught up so quickly so that they can get an ROI within a period of time that's reasonable for them. So what I love is that you have a very reasonably priced entry level program that they can easily get an ROI with 1 or 2 clients. And we map that out and we talk about it. And now we're getting even better at letting them know when they're not ready for the next program and what that can help them do and what the ROI opportunity is for that. And for anyone listening that doesn't have a business opportunity program, ROI can be anything. It can be the way that you feel about your health or your wellness or your relationships or anything like that. But the being able to quantify that, even if it feels slightly intangible, and communicate what to expect, is actually one of the best things we can do for our marketing. And you had done that already when we started working together.
Yeah, but I mean, we've done so much since we've been working together, right? So, I mean, I really came into working with Laura just again, right at that $1 million level. And I remember a previous program that I did, same thing. I came in right at whatever their benchmark was. I was, right kind of there. But having Laura, working with us has helped. We've accelerated our revenue like crazy, and that
Yeah.
feels so good, right? Like it feels so good because, well, I'll say my director of operations, shout out to Carolyn.
Hey, Carolyn.
Hey, Carolyn. Carolyn's about to go out on maternity leave, and so in the second half of this year, we're actually not doing anything new. Everything that we're doing from now at the time of this recording, it's July, through the end of the year are all like launches and offers and events that we have done in the past. And Laura has helped us tweak them. And that feels so good from just like an energy point of view, from a team point of view. I used to come up with new stuff all the time. And like I was giving myself whiplash, I was giving my team whiplash. It was terrible. To be able to sit with your team at our midway meeting, which we did a couple weeks ago at the beginning of July, and tell them that we are on track for our financial goals. We did an awesome job the first half of the year, and that the second half of the year would be the same, right? That we're going to do the same things, we're going to do them better. And the expectation is that we will double what we achieved in the first half of the year. The only thing different we're doing is that we're presenting at a conference. We're going to do an in-person conference, and that's a new thing that we're doing. Other than that, everything are things we've already done and are refining. And I totally, Laura, have you to thank on that, because old Jena would have been like, what new stuff can we do next month, right? Thank you for reining me in.
That's so funny. You are so welcome. And there may be a time for that, right? There may be a time for new products and programs. And some of my clients were working on that. And it's just like this, it's just kind of knowing the stage of business that you're in and what's happening for your team. It's really funny. I have a client that often says to me, Laura, I love that I pretty much hire you to remind me what it is that I said that I wanted.
Yeah.
That's been your role. And I think as an entrepreneur, like I'm one of those people that if you take the integrator on, visionary quiz, I'm like down the middle and I can flip between the two sides. I can see the visionary and there's a piece of me that's a huge visionary. And then there's a piece of me that always thinks about, well, how will this affect the business as well?
Oh man, a super quick story on that. So the book Rocket Fuel has the quiz that that Laura's talking about.
Yeah.
I was reading that book on an airplane on the way to a mastermind, and I got to the point with the quiz, right? And there's the visionary quiz first, and then there's the integrator quiz. And I did the visionary quiz, and I checked off all but 3 of like the 70 or whatever things. And I literally started crying. It made me emotional because a lot of the things that were in the book that I said yes to were all things I thought that were bad things, right?
Yes.
Like difficulty completing tasks, like bouncing around to different ideas, getting lost in trains of thought, never, I don't know, whatever. And I literally started crying because I thought, oh my gosh, like this is everything I've thought that was wrong with me are actually things that are right with me and are things that they're good to be a business leader. And then I started reading the integrator quiz and I got to the first 5 and they were all no's. And I said, well, I'm not even going to finish reading this. Part of the first part of the story. But anyway, it really, knowing yourself, like that whole know thyself thing makes such a difference. I remember when I turned 40, before I'm 41 now, but before then, every year I was like going to learn something new. Every year I had this idea, I'm going to learn how to do Excel. I'm bad at spreadsheets. I'm going to learn how to do spreadsheets. And finally, after that was literally on my to-do list for years, I was like, Jena, why? That would be
Why?
such a waste of time. That's not who you are. You don't care about that. And second shout out to Carolyn. She's a spreadsheet queen, right?
She's amazing.
She's amazing. So
Amazing.
no reason for me to do spreadsheets. She does an amazing job. She loves it. And so that whole know thyself thing, stay in your zone of genius. And so I'm now trying to do that. I'm trying to have my team do that. And I've hired Laura in a role where she's a consultant and she can stay in her zone of genius for my company. And that just feels so good. And reference earlier to the book Who Not How. If you haven't read that book, Dan Sullivan, you have to read it. It's fantastic. But yes, Laura is one of my who's, right? Carolyn is one of my who's. I recently started going to caring about my health. And so I'm going to a gym and I have a nutritionist. They are also who's in my life. And it has made a huge difference.
And your pickleball friends are your who.
My pickleball friends. Yes, I am one of these younger people who love pickleball, who play with all older people who I absolutely adore. And a lot of times they're better than me, and it's great.
Yes, we have lots of like tennis versus pickleball jokes, inside jokes on our team meetings. So it's been such an amazing chat with you. I know that so many people are just going to get so much of this conversation. Many of the listeners are much like you. They're selling to a similar type of market, whether it's teachers or healthcare providers, and just getting insight on how you approach your business, I think is so helpful. And then also us working together. I really appreciate you sharing your experience. It means so much to me. So if people want to connect with you, what is the best way for them to get in touch?
So the best way to get in touch is Instagram. I'm at Independent Clinician. I do also have a podcast. So since this is a podcast and clearly you're a podcast listener, if you wanted to check out the Private Practice Success Stories podcast, come give me a listen, but mostly Instagram at Independent Clinician.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jena, for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me and thank you for helping me with my business.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure.